Welcome to another episode of the Brian Green Show. I feel super blessed today to have Blake Kohler and Remington Rainey on. Both are really good friends of mine, and I'm just thankful that both of you are on the podcast. Both of these awesome gentlemen are entrepreneurs. Blake Kohler is the CEO and co-founder of Pulse for Good, and Remington is also a co-founder and chief value officer. Both of them have written books, one book specifically called Candid, The Power of Psychologically Safe Feedback.
It's a
And
mouthful.
yeah, it's great.
You think saying it's hard. Try and spell that.
Yeah,
Spelling it never goes well, man.
yeah, exactly. And both have a podcast called Candid Conversations. So I'm excited to have some candid conversations with you guys today. Thanks for being on the pod.
Of course.
Yeah, thanks for the invite.
Yeah. So, I thought about like, where could we go to begin? And you guys are amazing guys. And I really love spending time with both of you. What I'd love to ask both of you, and maybe we can start with Blake and then Rem, is like, what are you guys most excited about in life right now?
That's a great question. I guess the thing I'm most excited about is just that feeling of contentment in some ways, right? Like I woke up this morning, did all of the morning stuff that I normally do, and was, giving my wife a kiss on the way out and just be like, man, I am happy. Like I'm happy. Like I love my wife. I love my kids. I love my job. And I'm just excited for, another 30 years of doing what I'm doing before I, have to retire type of thing. So I suppose I'm excited for all sorts of things, but I know the future is going to be just as good as the present, and the present's pretty great right now.
That's awesome, man. Rem, what about you?
Yeah, I'm sitting here dumbfounded that the word AI didn't come out of Blake's mouth. But
That's in the present, Rem. It's not something in the future
Yeah,
I'm excited about. It's just here.
yeah, no, that for sure. Similar to Blake, just there is a satisfaction to being able to run your own thing, and I'm sure we'll get into it. But Blake and I were talking about it driving back from the airport from a conference we were just at, and just that what we've built is more of a lifestyle company. We're not trying to hyperscale this thing. It really is built for us, for our families, and for the improvement of other organizations around the world. But that's what I'm excited about is the setup that I've got in life. I'm really excited about my kids. My boy just got called to serve a mission in New Zealand.
Wow.
And just amped for him, playing tons of sports between lacrosse and volleyball. It's just fun time in life. I've got 5 kids from 18 down to 10. And as you know, Brian, that's you get a house full and it always keeps you busy. Honestly, that's what I'm excited about, is just keeping up with my kids.
Yeah. Well, that's why I love surrounding myself with the both of you. Cause I mean, your gratitude and like putting family first, and congrats, Rem. That's pretty awesome that your son's going to New Zealand. What an
Yeah.
awesome mission.
That's right.
I think what stands out from what both of you said, and you could call it a lifestyle business, but when you think about, and maybe we can get into, maybe this is a good segue into Pulse for Good, or we can kind of table that for a second, but like starting your own business, have you ever felt like this pressure to like start and scale and just scale and like really grow it? And how did you navigate kind of your feelings around wanting to scale and create a lifestyle company that is adding value, but maybe you don't want a huge board of directors, and maybe you don't want a ton of investors and private equity into it, and it just gives you a ton of flexibility. Like, how did you guys go about kind of thinking through that? And was that from the beginning, was that kind of the goal, or did that evolve as you guys navigated the business?
Yeah, definitely evolved. Yeah, you can add into this, Blake. But speaking of AI, right? Blake was like, "Hey, it's something I was looking at, like, how do we grow? And here's some of our goals." And just kind of having one of those conversations that I think probably all of us have had with AI, just exploring it at this point. And it brought up a good thing, which really did a good job of highlighting where we are from an evolution of exploring taking on money and what that means. And I really kind of pointed out, like, hey, yeah, that's great I understand you have goals, and that's great to want to do that, but do you really want to hit that goal? Because what that means is the growth that you'd be going for, you would eventually have to scale at kind of VC backed rates. And that's a conversation we've always had internally, is like, every time it comes up, it's really comes down to, do we want more? We want bosses because we enjoy being our own bosses, and we work together. And that's something that we should probably bring up too. Is we've got, yeah, you haven't hung out with him that I know of, Brian, but our other co-founder, Mark Weaver, he's always, I guess, happy to not be on these things. It's really probably the best way to put it. But he's the CFO and just enjoys spreadsheets and the numbers and whatnot. But we all think very similarly of just like, yeah, and we all value just our time and flexibility. We understand that not putting in 70 to 80 hours a week to hyperscale this thing has its own values for our family, for our families, for our health, all those things. So I don't know, what would you add, Blake?
I think helpful context to all this is, so Mark Graham and I started the business about 10 years ago with a few other co-founders who have since left. And one of the interesting things about the three of us is we're all brothers-in-law. So Rem and I married sisters, right? So our wives are sisters. And Mark is the brother of those sisters, right? And so the thing that's interesting for me is we scale to try and help the family. Like it's a weird thing, but for us, it's not just growing a business; it's really helping the entire family as we grow. And so I think some of the decisions we've made around stuff have less been conscious, like, oh, we want this type of company, and more of like, hey, Mark just had another kid; he can't do some of these things because we don't want to take away from him being able to be with his new baby. And we're doing that not as business decisions, but as uncles, right? Like we want them to have that experience. And so we build a company that facilitates that because that's the familial relationship is the most important thing, not necessarily how the company's doing. It just happens to be that one of the best ways to help the family is by having the company do really well. And so, another example I was just thinking of is Rem's son Sawyer, that's living on mission, was an awesome football player and played for Green Canyons last year. They went to the state championship and did awesome. But one of those things was like, we want to make sure Rem can be at those games, right? So we don't want to build a company where Rem has to work 70 hours and can't be at his son's football games. And so I think it was less conscious trade-off of like, this is where we want, and more of, we have these priorities that are unmovable. And so the company has to flow around those priorities.
Yeah. I'm curious, like, I love what you guys are saying, and I think there's a lot to unpack there that I want to get into. But do you, as entrepreneurs, feel like whether it's on LinkedIn or social media, there's almost a lot of attention and people get a lot of, call it validity or call it attention for like the grind and a lot of hours? And like, what do you two think? Like, why is that? Like, why does our society kind of tend to highlight that it's just a grind? It's going to be a grind. We're working hard. And what principles in both of your lives has helped you kind of stay grounded and kind of think about like, this is a family business. The vision is to give more time back to our families. We want to be with our families. We want to grind, but we want to be efficient with our time. And like, any thoughts come to mind as, that question is kind of presented?
Yeah, well, it's just interesting you ask like what principles. I think hopefully those are decided before you're creating a business, and I think that's what drew us together, is that not just, of course, family and just having lots of conversations together and that built-in trust, which is huge. But we saw those principles in each other that, okay, I'm assuming, and we got into deeper conversations later that, hey, if I had to do this, they'd have my back, meaning take off or not attend this conference or fill in for me if I had something come up, which has happened multiple times. And the why, so number one, I would definitely say, hey, make sure you've got those principles locked in. And I would say for sure, around when we built the business, I think there was that, to your point earlier, like there is that draw of the, oh yeah, let's go get seed funding. Sounds cool, VC backed, all of these different things. And there's opportunities around for sure for all of that. And we kind of had to decide like, what do we want? What's going to best serve us and our goals, and why there's the luxury. In some ways, I'd almost argue that you see a little bit of that flipping, the not luxury, but the envy or the painting. Hey, look at me, I'm the guy on the grind. I'm in this city, I'm in that city. And honestly, I'm frankly impressed with those people that are just jet setting and from a business standpoint and in different cities all the time. It is an impressive thing, and it's amazing the amount of business they probably are drumming up. But on the flip side, I think I'm seeing a trend more towards the, hey, be healthy yourself first and take care of your family and make sure that those pieces are in place, and then build the rest around your business and fill in where you can. And if you're not able to do what's right for you and your family and the lifestyle that you want, then you need to go find something else. And sometimes that's creating your own thing. Sometimes that's, hey, I'm in this hyper growth business that is requiring. I often think of like financial markets and things like that, and hedge fund managers, and those guys just have to grind. I listened to a podcast recently about an ultra marathon runner, and he was in that world, made 7 figures a year, no problem, but was just burnt out and literally had no time to even create a family of his own. And it led down a crazy path. And he now is a huge advocate of just, hey, you need to do what's right for you, and you're going to burn out if you're running at that pace. So I think there's a time and a season, especially for certain people. Young single guy, I think as long as you got your values and principles in place, go for it. Hit that 80 hours a week. It's probably better than hanging out on Tinder and the Xbox, but
Yeah,
to each their own.
sure.
Yeah. When I'm thinking about it, you guys know I love basketball, right? So there's this interesting thing that happens kind of mid-season as in the NBA as teams are tanking, right? It's been a big conversation lately. But you start looking at box scores and seeing people that put up absurd box score numbers, right? Like they'll they'll be shooting like crazy and score a whole bunch of points. But you realize in a lot of ways, they're very empty stats because they don't lead to wins, right? And it doesn't actually reflect how good the player is, because if the competition is not actually competing, then it doesn't matter. And sometimes I wonder if, especially on social media, we're posting box scores as opposed to the actual wins, right?
Yeah.
And saying, oh, I scored 80 points. Well, who cares if you lost, right? And I think about that with many companies and posting on like, hey, look at how many hours we're working, look at all this type of stuff. And that is awesome. I don't want to turn down or belittle hard work, because there's an immense value in hard work. But sometimes I think we spend more time praising our own hard work than we do actually doing the hard work, right? And even with raising money, sometimes I think people think raising money is the goal. And our goal has always been making money, because it doesn't matter if we can raise $10 million if our business can't be solvent and can't make money. To me, that's not winning. And I think a lot of this comes from, we have some internal values that we call out for every employee. And we actually give some books out to people when they get hired. And 2 of them that come to mind. One is Clayton Christensen. I don't know if you've ever read his stuff or seen it, but he's got a wonderful book called How You Measure Your Life.
Mhm.
So Clayton Christensen was the president of Harvard School of Business, gets diagnosed with leukemia, basically realizes he's going to die, and is asked to give a commencement speech at Harvard as he's going through his cancer treatment. And his whole life had been dedicated to how are you measuring companies and seeing if they're succeeding. And so, towards the end of his life, he basically looked at it and said, how do I know if I succeeded, if I was successful in life? And he gave this wonderful speech. And afterwards, they came to him and said, you need to write that into a book. And so he has this wonderful book where he talks about how do you measure if you're being successful in life? And so many of the vanity metrics we chase don't actually measure if we're successful, don't align with our true goals and values when we look at it that way. And so that I think directs us a little bit. And another goal a value we have in the company comes from a book by a guy named Greg McKeown, who's a professor at Stanford, that is called Essentialism.
Mm.
And he has this concept of doing less things, but doing it better, right? And so we've just kind of been thrown that as a value of, we want to do less, but better. We want to do less things overall, but make sure the things we do are better and of higher quality. And I think the combination of that, of realizing what metrics actually matter to us, and I think a metric for us is profitability, is having actual money and not just investment money, right? Is not having debt, is doing all those type of things. That's a value we care about. And then that other value of let's not try and chase everything we could be doing. Let's pick the things we think are the most important and make sure we're optimizing for those things.
Yeah, I love that. I've got to refresh my mind on how you measure your life. I read that book, and I know Clayton Christian, didn't he end up passing away?
Yeah, he ends up passing away. He's of the same faith as of us, right? And he served in his church calling for quite a while, and then he ended up passing away not too long ago.
Yeah.
But he He may have become more famous for his work after he got cancer than he was for his work before, which was pretty amazing because he came up with the innovator's dilemma, basically this idea of you need to innovate or you die, right? Is effectively his life work. And part of the way through, when life threw a real challenge at him, he changed his whole perspective on things.
Yeah. So for our listeners, like you, Blake, have a background in, correct me if I'm wrong, software engineering or
Yep.
coding. Rem, you've played a role in different things, but primarily like a sales and relationship, business development. And then you
Yeah.
said your other co-founder, his name's, okay, yeah, partnerships.
Mhm.
Is it Mark Weaver or what's your
Uh-huh.
brother? Okay. What's his background? What
Well,
was he a he's a financial guy, I'm
yeah,
guessing.
Mark's done all sorts of things, but done lots of sales and lots of finance stuff.
Okay. So you guys are at the house. It's Sunday night. You're eating a nice meal. Your wives are all hanging out, and you three come together. And it's like, uh, how do you come up with a service that's helping get real time feedback in the homelessness or homeless space? Like how did that idea kind of come to fruition? And yeah, maybe walk us through that.
Sure. So Rem likes to point out that it was kind of our wives calling us on the fact that we kept talking a big talk and never doing anything about it.
We had lots of
Right.
ideas.
We had tons of ideas. So, Rem, you can correct me if I get any of this wrong. But as I remember it, we basically said, fine, we don't know what we're going to do, but we're going to meet every Monday night and start working on things. And so we started meeting every Monday night. And I had the idea to do software that measured employee happiness. And part of it was I was working at a company where there was a bunch of unhappy employees. And I wanted to be able to show my bosses the unhappiness that I was seeing in kind of my direct reports. And so uh, built this little software that was going to send out an email every week to just be like, are you happy or not? Basically. In doing this, we ran across someone that we knew that was working in the city of Seattle and explained what we were doing. And they said, hey, could we use this for the youth homeless population up here in Seattle? And we said, yeah, totally, definitely. We had no idea, didn't know challenges, no anything. We just said, yeah, we definitely could do this. How hard could it be? And they were applying for a grant competition with the Bloomberg Foundation. They were going to fund 4 kind of moonshot things across the country. And so we did a bunch of work with them, kind of got it set up. They applied for the grant and they didn't get selected. And so when we came back, we said, well, we have all this information. We've set up all this thing. Let's see if anyone else wants this. And so we reached out locally. We're here in Utah. So we reached out locally to groups that were running homeless operations here in Utah and pitched it to them. And they liked the idea. And one of them was brave enough to try and pilot it. It was a really hard thing for these groups to put themselves out there to get potentially negative feedback, right? And we had one, Matt Melville is his name. He's still here in Utah in Park City running a cool organization there. But he was running Catholic Community Services, their homeless stuff at the time. And he's like, you know what? I don't care if it points out the negative. Like we need feedback to get better. And so we said, let's try it. And so we started getting, doing surveys inside of the Wiegand Center, which is in downtown Salt Lake, and it was a hit. And from there, we had other people say, hey, can we use this? Can we use this here? Can we use this here? And we scaled out from there. Rem, what am I forgetting in that process?
No, I think that's pretty much how it went down. I do. There's a couple, like, I guess, business sides of things that I often get asked in there. Lots of people have ideas and want to start their own things, and really, I don't think we think much of it. We're definitely not ones to get out and tout what we do, but sometimes it is crazy when LinkedIn's like, "Hey, congrats on 10 years at Pulse or 9 years at Pulse," and it's like, "Oh, geez, has it been that long?" Feels like a year ago that we were trying to figure out whether people would even answer a question on a kiosk and if we could figure out hardware and all of that stuff. But one of the questions a lot of people ask is okay, so what did you do? What made this successful and how did you start that? And they're asking like any tips for me. And that's the thing that stood out to me in our process of everything. The one thing that was consistent was our Monday night meetings. And they were brutal sometimes because a lot of times we'd come away, at least I would come away with like, man, we got all these ideas even before we settled on feedback solutions. And it's just like, geez, how do you pick one and which one's the right path? But we kept having Monday meetings and then it would distill itself even more and become more and more clear. And so that's one thing, is that consistent Monday meeting before it was even a thing, before we were, we were spending time on it, not much money. But that was definitely a clarity point, is when that group came and was like, hey, this is a need for us. And I think all of us talked about that, of like, dang, helping to helping youth homeless programs determine how they can be better for those in that crappy situation. If we're going to spend our Monday nights on something, what better cause, right? And I think it was us just picking that thing because it resonated with us. It's like, in my head, frankly, it was like, if this thing's going to be a nights and weekends thing, we may as well make it be for a good thing and push towards it. And then later on in that, to Lake's point, another thing that I want to call out is that Matt Melville with Catholic Community Services in Salt Lake. We still use, they're a pilot customer of ours. They were one of the first pilot customers. They're the client. They're just like, oh yeah, we're an open book. If anyone wants to look at our data and if they can highlight where we can do better, send us an email or call us, because we're here to improve. And that's really was crucial to us expanding and having the confidence, was one person being fearless. Like, I don't care. I know how I have tons of places to do better, because that was a consistent thing that we saw early that would have really stopped us in our tracks. If someone like that wouldn't have had that growth mindset, we would have just been like, look, no one's willing to do this. We did, like, a neighboring organization was just like, hey, sounds cool. I definitely get the concept, but unless it's in our contract, absolutely not. We're not doing it unless we're told we have to. And it's like, oh, dang. So it was interesting that we almost got two ends of the spectrum there early on, and very hard yes, very hard no. And fortunately, we were able to take that path that was opened up for us.
We have two other experiences. I think people think of like the genesis of a business being like, you have this one idea and everything branches from there, right? I look at it more of, we had a whole bunch of different stepping stones that evolved this into the business that we're at. And at any point, we could have branched out and become a very different business. Like at the beginning, we were trending just to, hey, this is something we do on nights and weekends, and maybe it makes a little bit of money, right? One of them was, we had a behavioral health customer that we had signed up, and we had no idea how much to charge them, like money wise at all. And so we were like, how about you pay us $1,500 a month? Now, for context, we now charge $350 a month for the same thing. Way overpriced for where we've eventually landed. But we said, hey, $1,500 a month. And they said, okay. They tried it for, I don't know, 6 to 9 months, something like that. And they called back and
They what?
I think they even said, hey, we'll do 2 subscriptions at that rate.
Yeah, so we were charging like $3,000, and then 6 to 9 months in, they called and said, "Hey, we're going to cancel." And I was like, "God, dang it! Like that's a bummer, whatever." And so then I asked them, and they're like, "Oh, it's just too expensive." And we're like, "Okay." And so I was like, "What if we charged you $250 a month for each one of them?" And they're like, "Well, let me think about it and get back to you." And then we got a phone call from them later that week saying, "Hey, can we have 30 of them?" And it was like, "Well, yeah, sure." And so it was clear that we were overcharging, but once we hit that right sweet spot, all of a sudden there was a huge demand for it from that group.
Yeah.
And so that was a big inflection point, because then we realized, like, if we do this well, if we're charging a good fair price for this, where we're still making money, but they feel the value, we can get bigger contracts. And then another inflection point I think about was we were meeting with an advisor at a restaurant and having lunch and going through everything with them. And he asked the question, like, why aren't you full-time doing this? And we gave him all the reasons that we weren't full-time. And he basically was like, look, it's never going to work until you believe in it enough to go full-time. He's like, if you don't believe in it enough, then you're not going to have the belief that's necessary to do this. And we basically walked out of it, and not exactly the next day type of thing, but pretty close. We quit our jobs and went full-time, and it could pay ourselves almost nothing. And it worked out. But it was that interesting also delineation point of like, hey, at some point you have to go from this doesn't cost me anything really, like, because it wasn't costing us anything, right? Nights and weekends are nothing. But to be able to say, hey, I'm going to really sacrifice for this, that I think everyone hits that inflection point where they have to do that.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you guys sharing that. And there's a lot of learnings. I've been taking notes, and I think one, just to confirm. So you guys meet someone, or you have a relationship where you can kind of launch this idea in Seattle. And as what I'm hearing, you build the tech, you get the hardware, but the Seattle group doesn't get a grant. And so you actually, it's like a go, no go type scenario. Is that so? And you have the inventory, like Blake, you built all the software, or where were you?
So
That like?
yes, so we had the software, we had the we only had one piece of hardware because we could only afford one piece of hardware. So I mean, like it sucked. I guess like I don't know another way to describe it. Like, but the thing that I've discovered is there's lots of things that suck in building a business, right? Like there's lots of days where you're like, oh, we're just toast. And then there's other days where you're like, there's nothing that's going to stop us from being millionaires. And the truth of the matter is that the life is very much more in the middle of those two things. And so yeah, like it sucked, but we also looked at it pretty quickly and said, how can we pivot? And I 100% remember that was probably like October-ish, maybe. And we had a meeting and we were talking about what to do next and everything. So we said, okay, why don't we reach out to all the people in Utah? We'll reach out to like state senators, we'll reach out to anybody and just see who we can get in front of. And what we can do. And we'd heard back from basically nobody. But we had a meeting and we said, okay, if we can't hear back from anybody this week, let's just pick something else. Let's scrap it. Let's move on and do something else. And I totally remember like praying about it and being like, hey, like if this is the right path, throw us a bone, basically. Right. And we on Twitter, I think is what it is. I reached out to Senator Anderegg. He used to be a state senator down in Utah County, and said, hey, this is what we're doing. And he's like, hey, I'd like to meet. And I totally remember sending that text out to everybody being like, whoa, like we have somebody who wants to meet with us. Thinking that would be we would be in, the legislature would fund it, everything would be great.
We were amped about that meeting.
Oh, we were super amped about the meeting. And it was a good meeting, but also it was one of those where it's like, oh, we're totally not getting the legislature to pay for this. But all it did is it gave us enough momentum to reach out to the next person. And so the next person we reached out to was Preston Cochran, which shout out Preston. He's doing amazing things right now at the other side
Village.
Other side of Village. Thank you. It's on the other side academy. Same group, but they're different programs. But Preston was over Shelter the Homeless in Utah, which was building the new shelters at the time in Salt Lake City. And, that was a few weeks after meeting with Senator Anderegg that he let us have a meeting, and he was one of our biggest supporters. And so it was just these like small flashes of light as we were traveling through kind of a dark tunnel that was like, okay, yeah, let's keep going because there's just enough to get us propelled down this direction. I wish I could say that's advice for people running a business is go that way. But I think for us, at least it was, I think in a lot of ways, divinely guided to just enough excitement to get us to keep going in this direction.
Yeah, I was trying to, as you were explaining that, I was trying to think of a way we could distill that down into something that would be beneficial for people. And really, I think that's sitting in front of Preston and the Shelter of the Homeless team of Utah. Like we have, I think, good intent. We had pivoted because it was like, well, if we're going to do something, spend time on this, maybe we never make money. But at least we can create something that would be helpful. It was interesting. We had the meeting with Senator Anderegg, and in some ways we saw the political reality of the space we were getting into. He saw the value of what we were doing, but was very much so like, I want to use this data to show that there's a ton of waste happening. And in a lot of ways, he's not wrong. I wasn't wrong at the time, but he was for sure trying to weaponize the data. And it's like, oh, shoot, we see why some people were hesitant to just jump on board and say, oh, I'll put this in my facility. They realize data can go wrong for them and ruin contracts. And then on the flip side, we get in front of Shelter the Homeless and they say, how much can we do this for the state of Utah? And our answer is $1 million. And they're like, okay. And didn't bat an eye at it. And we're just like, holy cow, that's great. And in hindsight, that never worked out, panned out. They would have been the worst deal we ever made. Because it would have been quite a bit more expensive if we were doing every single service provider for the state of Utah for that price. And so,
right,
just we got the right, I think number one, divine inspiration, but I think a lot of people also saw the ambition that we had. And I think that group at Shelter the Homeless was like, these guys are young. They're going to get hit in the face with some of these political realities, but they've got energy and they want to do a good thing. And what they've got is going to be useful. And then one other thing, like a huge blessing that came through all of this. So just not to say that we've done awesome things, but that there was help along the way. There's a group out of Los Angeles that kind of was like, hey, these guys kind of have some money. They're a foundation. One of our early models of monetizing was, oh, well, of course, these solutions providers, these service providers that are nonprofits, they don't have tons of money. We've got to go to the funders. And of course, the funders want the data of how effective the services are for the people they're serving, no brainer, right? Doesn't work that way. Funders are happy to say, hey, we want our service providers to make their own decisions. If it's a useful tool, we need them to say they want it and need it and buy it with the money that we give them. But this specific group was just like, hey, we love your guys' ambition, what you're doing. And they just cut us a check for 15 grand to say, do what you need to do with this. Like, we're not going to use it. We're not going to tell one of our service providers that they have to use it. So if you want to use that money to go market to them or whatever you need to do. So another huge blessing that I think we were blessed with just by, I guess perseverance and lots of prayers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to shout out that guy even more, because it wasn't even the foundation. It was someone inside the foundation.
That's
One of
right.
the guys that said, I believe in this. And Tom Mulvaney down in San Diego, incredible man. Just, cut us a $10,000 check. I still have a picture of the check because I was just blown away that he would just say, I believe in this enough that I don't want equity. I don't want anything. I just want you to do this in San Diego. And so it was pretty awesome. And to be fair, we've done it, right? There's 60 some odd of our kiosks in San Diego. They're gathering feedback from homeless people there right now and have been for the last 4 or 5 years. So it's pretty remarkable. Yep. Pretty remarkable when the stars align for you. I wish I could distill lessons from this for other people. And I think the lesson is work hard until the right thing is in your path. And then I guess the other lesson is things work out, right? Even if the company doesn't work out, like we could still fail tomorrow. And I still firmly believe things will work out.
Yeah, I think what I'm distilling from this is like a lot here, but clearly hard work. You had a vision. I think your guys' ability to pivot and kind of navigate like government entities and how they approach budgeting and how they approach buying software. And then like I never sold when I was in tech. I never sold in the government, but I heard the nightmares and the red tape and the buying, just the sales cycle is just super difficult. So what I think is hard work, you pivoted, you didn't quit. But I think one thing I want to highlight here that hasn't been maybe mentioned is the fact that it feels to me like you guys have built a really strong partnership. And there's a lot of successful family businesses and there's others that go the other way. And working with family, it can be difficult. And so I'm curious, like, for someone that wants to start a business and they're really close to their brother or sister or in-laws like you guys have, how have you guys put yourself in a position? And going back to Blake and his love for basketball, like Blake, Ty Wesley and I, if you remember Ty, like we had this ability to we had this type of relationship where we would chew each other out and say things that, I can't say on the microphone, but it was like words you don't want to tell each other at a level, but it's like we were there to win. And like after we got off the court, we were best friends. It's like, how do you put a family relationship in a position where you can speak candidly, but then see each other on a Sunday and just be like, not that everything's like perfect, but like you guys, I just feel like you guys have built such a cool relation or business partnership. And I'm curious, like how does that partnership play a role into the distilling of lessons that we're kind of talking about?
It's a good question. And I'm curious how Rem answers it. But I think from my perspective, one of the things that we teach organizations that we work with, right, is the need for psychological safety, right? That's what we wrote a book on. Well, psychological safety is just that ability to feel safe to say the things that you need to say. And there's a lot of different ways that you can do that, right? One of the ways that we harness as a company is just anonymity, right? When you're anonymous, you can say things that you don't feel comfortable saying in person. But there's nothing that takes the place of relationships in psychological safety. The best relationships tend to have the highest level of safety, which allow you to share things or say things that are hard in other contexts. And so I think one of the things is that we have high psychological safety is we're able to share things and have hard conversations. Also, frankly, our conversations don't often get that hard because we're constantly talking and sharing, right? Like it'd be different if we were waiting every 6 months to have a conversation about hard things, as opposed to, the drive we were taking back from, we're at a conference in Denver earlier this week. So we're driving back in from the airport and we're having a conversation about the future of the company. And we probably have that same conversation like every week, right? Because it's just a continual conversation. And so it helps expectations, I think, not drift off into other places. And there's obviously places we disagree. But I think the important thing is we have our individual and family's interest at best interest at heart, not necessarily the business best interest at heart. And I think that's a helpful anchor. I don't know. I'm curious your opinion on that.
Yeah, no, Blake wouldn't say this himself, but it's pretty easy. A lot of it does, and I think that stems, like, you can see why, because we all sat down, our partnership that we started with, and we literally just took a vote and said, "Hey, does anyone have any strong preferences of who should do what?" And obviously, we're going to need a CEO or president. We didn't even have the structure set up, but we were all, especially because Blake had come up with the one that was like, what about this employee happiness thing? And he had come with a structured plan of like, hey, it ended up being the most structured thing. So twofold, Blake came with the structure and the idea. And so I think that gave us the initial desire to want to say, well, this is your baby, so let's put you in charge of this guy. But at the same time, something consistent about Blake is his first intent is always asking, how can I help you? Not how can he help himself? And that, I think that's how we've built our business. In sales, that's the easy thing to ask. Blake doesn't come from sales, but it's been consistent in what we've done at Pulse is take that methodology of just saying, help us help you. What can we do? And we're straight up with people, like, our most helpful thing for you is telling you that we can't do the thing that would be most helpful for you. We can't partner, but guess what? We've got some people we can point you to. So really that, I think just that helpful mentorship of being gracious and selfless instead of selfish first, and what are we going to get out of this? And I have to pause, or Blake will pause me on sales deals of like, I know that's probably best from a sales negotiation standpoint, but if we do it this other way, it's going to come back to help us instead of bite us in the butt. And I think that's been true. So to put that out there is just helping others, and I think it stems a lot of just Blake's personality, and that's bled off onto Mark and I. Mark and I both have more of a sales mentality, and just like you were saying with you and Ty Wesley, like, of course you didn't hate anybody on the other team or anything, but like, it's a killer mentality. Like, no, we will win and we will do what we need to win. And I think in combination of being in this nonprofit, we're definitely a for-profit company, but we work with so many nonprofits, a little more fluffy. And I guess that's the best way I can put it, is fluffy and nice. But that said, like, things have to make sense and pencil out. And, I think that's built into the principles of the company is like, hey, if we do the right thing by other people, that's going to circle back right around to us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go
Sorry,
ahead.
Brian. And one of the things I was just thinking that I think has been a helpful thing that I would recommend to others, especially in this situation, is we do a quarterly planning every quarter, right, with the whole company, and we know where we're going that quarter and what we're working on. And almost unfailingly, you get 2 weeks into it, and something changes, and we're off doing something else. But at least we have some sort of guidepost. And then each year we do a yearly planning where we actually bring our wives and we'll go through all the business stuff with them so they understand where we're at, what the goals are, where our plan is for the next year, that type of thing. And I think that's actually been really helpful because what it does is it helps everyone understand this is what we're working towards. Even early on, like, this is what we need to get to be able to do raises, right? To be able to pay ourselves more. Here's where, we hope are projecting to be able to pay ourselves over the next couple of years. Here's our 10-year goal of being able to do it. And I think that has created an anchoring effect too of we know, we don't as often have different ideas of where the company's going. And coming all the way back around, I think there could be that temptation to be like, oh, one person thinks we should go get a bunch of money and hyperscale this, and right, somebody else doesn't want to do it or whatever. But I think aligning at least every quarter and every year has really helped that as well, and especially in the broader family context as well, because my wife knows, okay, this is the plan for this year. This is where we're trying to go, and she understands that, which is helpful in a large measure because then that entire partnership, right? It's not just the three of us; it's six of us that are all aligned and have to be aligned in that process.
Yeah. Rim, I don't know if you had a comment, but I think I would say that's probably pretty unique. I could be wrong, but a family business that meets yearly that also brings the spouses, and just creates a lot of alignment. And I think that's just really cool. I think there's probably a lot that can be learned from there. I think a question on my mind, and I was looking at your website, and I'm really curious what you guys think about this, but looking at the problem section of your website. Back in 2000, there was a quote or a statistic from the Journal of Applied Social Psychology that says 74% told the truth. And I don't know where he just went, but
We lost Rem.
he Rem's out. Um, of
You, you, you brought up stats and he's gone.
the sales guy's gonna get freaking fact checked, right? No, 74% tell the truth under anonymous conditions versus 25% under confidential conditions.
Yeah.
So the question that I have is, how do you, as a leader and the CEO, or Rem when he comes back, how do you create an environment in the company where the people that your subordinates or your people that you're leading have the confidence, like they fall under, I don't know, like how do you create an environment where people can vocalize things that they like about the company, things that they like about what you're doing, but also highlight things that they don't like about your leadership style or the culture or whatever? Because that's one thing in sports, like you watch film and you get called out and everyone kind of knows where they stand. And so there's a stat box. There's a box that shows. And I'm curious, Blake, how you go about that.
So, like, this is where I feel like we actually have the best foot to stand on to speak, because this is what we teach organizations. But coming back to what we talked about earlier with relationships, like the scale of our company is small enough where we can have those relationships with everybody. And so it invites and promotes places for people to be able to share that feedback without as much of those fear, because everyone knows each other. Where it really gets tricky is when your business gets big enough that people don't know you. Right. The person working in the front lines doesn't know you as the CEO or you as a co-founder or whoever it is. And then the jump from being able to them not knowing you to be able to give feedback is kind of large, which is where a tool like ours, where you have that anonymity that people can fill stuff out, is helpful. But for most organizations, like the real truth of it is it's building relationships with people, showing evidence that feedback is taken and used, but that usage doesn't have to be that I agree with the feedback, right? We get feedback all the time that is just bad ideas.
Mm-hmm.
The real trick is, can you take feedback and help people feel validated in receiving that feedback and thank them for that feedback and still make the best choice regardless of who's giving that feedback or not? And when you can show people you A, use that feedback and you value it, but B, there's no ramifications of them giving particularly negative feedback and particularly about an individual, about you. If you can show that, all of a sudden it increases the trust and their willingness and that psychological safety for them to be able to do it again. Right.
Yeah.
So go back to your example of you and Ty, right? The first time you guys probably butted heads, it probably felt more uncomfortable than the last time you guys butted heads, because over time, you were able to build a relationship where you knew that was just how it was going to be. And maybe that first time there's that awkward conversation afterwards where it's like, hey, sorry, man, I was just heat of the moment or whatever it is. And then by the end, you don't have to have the conversation because you've just got that relationship. So that would be, I guess, if I was trying to teach other organizations how to do this, is build relationships and finish the feedback loop. Right? The feedback loop is asking, collecting, analyzing, implementing, and notifying. Most groups fail because they ask, they collect, and they analyze. They don't ever implement, and they don't ever notify the people that gave feedback about what you're doing. And it could be like, hey, you say that I'm awful running meetings. Okay, great. I've got that. I'm probably analyzing in my head all the time, but am I doing anything about it? And even if I decide that, hey, I'm not going to change how I run meetings because I think it's actually good based off of other feedback. Well, okay, how am I notifying people that that feedback was received and there's no retaliation afterwards here? Using that feedback loop to build trust, it becomes a virtuous cycle where organizations get more and more in tune. And you've seen it in sports teams, right? You've got those teams where they can say whatever they want to each other, and there isn't the hard feelings because they've banked that currency of trust over and over again. Had a situation not that long ago here where I was just grumpy, right? And we're in a meeting, and I snapped at Rem at a certain point, and walked out of it. I walked out, feeling awful, because you never. It's the same thing when you yell at your kids or whatever. But one of the benefits is I knew we had that trust where Rem just knew, like, You're just having one of those days type of thing because you have that currency of trust that you've built up over time. So I don't know, maybe an elongated way to answer that question, but how you solicit feedback and you get people to give it to you is you show that you'll do good things with the feedback that's been entrusted to you.
And so I'm curious, have you guys ever thought about, I mean, your niche right now is in the homeless space. Am I correct? Like with
Yeah.
the book that
Human services.
okay,
Yeah. So we
human
do
service.
homeless behavioral health, federally qualified health clinics. Basically, anybody that's having the worst day of their life, that's who we're surveying.
Yeah.
Domestic violence centers, mental behavioral health, um, expanding
Okay.
into correction, those places.
Again, people having crappy days.
Well, I can tell like you're passionate, and Rem mentioned earlier like that was exciting about the business idea from the beginning. But Blake, as I'm hearing you and co-authoring a book as a team, what's keeping you from have you thought about not pivoting, but adding a new solution within the company that can go and help larger corporate America companies to, and I can't remember all the five things, but ultimately the last two, what were they, Blake? The
Imp, imp, yeah, implement and
implement.
notify.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of companies that probably do the first three really well, just like, but do they do the last two? Have you guys thought about like, diversifying or adding a new service where you become like the coaches, the feedback loop coaches that can go and implement this at like a broader scale? Or will it, and I don't know, I just feel like there might be an opportunity there, specifically because you guys can be those thought leaders. And I don't know. I just a thought. I don't know if that's ever been thought about, but it just came to my mind because you guys are passionate about it.
Yeah. No, we talk about that all the time. Ultimately, hospitals are the next kind of the large market opportunity. Although crazy enough, one of the things that we definitely have whenever anyone says like, oh, what type of work does Pulse do? What's your core customer? And it's like, oh, homeless service providers. They're like, what? Are you sure that's a path for dollars? It isn't. Honestly, it's not like a big dollar thing. It really kind of depends on funding and some requirements there and those change over the years. Interestingly enough, there are more homeless service providers in America than there are car dealerships. Just to go to show like, number one, we're not crazy. There is money enough to at least make a lifestyle company. Number two, that there's a huge impact that can be made if we help those groups get better and better. But to your point, we do want to scale out. So it's a scale of vulnerability. So we believe that our solution does best the more vulnerable the individual being served is. Probably the last place that will be is like a restaurant or a movie theater, just because if I don't like it, I walk out and there's hundreds of different options, right?
Yeah.
Not to say that it can't be helpful, but there's really that private sector that understands the consumer journey and spends a lot of dollars there already. This just happens to be a place where they're well intended, they mean to, but the resources they haven't had that focus and realized, oh, completing that feedback loop is going to really pay dividends for us collectively as a nation, as government, but also as a service provider. So we for sure want to go that route. There's probably a book, if you're in the product world, you've read a book called Nail It and Scale It.
Hmm.
And the concept is simple. Like, you got to nail your solution first before you go scale it. And I would say we've nailed it at the basic premises of allowing people, helping people to close the feedback loop and understand that better. But the full solution of each step of those, we're still nailing, I would say. And part of that, I think Blake is getting another master's in, what is it,
Organizational psychology.
psychology
Oh,
at Harvard. So
Yeah.
really, really
Sick.
helping us solidify the expertise there. And it's been helpful. Like, we have a ton of conversations about, okay, what are you learning there that we can grow into the business as well. That was part of writing the book was, hey, we actually had a client that was like, you guys literally should write a book because no one focuses on this like you do. And
really?
that's where that came from. And so, yeah, I love the encouragement because we definitely want to be in hospitals. And we've seen, actually, was it Qualtrics that just bought Pressgani or vice versa?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Qualtrics bought Pressgani.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pressgani does very similar things to we do, but in the hospital system,
Okay.
they're the big player in that regard.
In your
Yeah.
world.
Rem, as you were talking, I was thinking about we were watching figure skating this past year, right, with the Olympics and things. And my kids are asking how they can
You were
spin.
just recently randomly watching figure skating. I was like, wow. I mean, I knew you liked
Yeah,
sports, Blake, but
no, I know, but I mean,
I
good
got it.
on the
Oh,
figure skaters. Good on them. But my kids are asking how they can spin like that, and I was explaining that as you pull your arms in, like your momentum just goes a lot faster, right? And as your
Yeah.
arms go out, that's how they slow down. And so I think Brian, a simple answer to your questions is one of the few things I think we've done deliberately is we know we could go after all sorts of places. It's just Rem mentioned car dealerships. We've had a few groups saying, hey, you should do this for car dealerships. They want feedback just as much as anybody else. They want to know why people didn't buy when they come into to sell stuff. But by sticking to a very narrow niche, it's allowed us to have a lot more momentum, right? We pulled our arms in. We don't have to worry about some of the side use cases and different things. And we can slowly add additional things as we go out that are more side use cases for different groups. But we're doing it with a lot of momentum as opposed to trying to reach out and grab everybody that will slow our momentum down as we go.
Love it. I love that analogy. And I've got to believe that that's probably another, think about the things we've taken from this conversation, like narrowing down, like riches and niches, right? Like you guys have owned the niche, like in us in real estate, we're trying to niche down a multifamily. We could go to industrial and storage and flex and, RV parks, but we're trying to get really good at multifamily. So I get that. I think to conclude this conversation, and it's been a really good one, one thing that I always like to ask is, what are you most grateful for? Like today or just in this last couple weeks, just life in general. Like when you think about your life, is there something that you just are feeling really grateful for today? And what is that? And maybe Rem, we can start with you and then Blake.
yeah. Honestly, the thing that comes to mind is hardships. Just whether
Mm,
it's business or family. There's plenty of times that inside of Pulse and personally, it's been some rocky roads of, oh man, like it doesn't get worse than this. It's, your just head is down in a trench and you can't see above it, and it really muddies the vision coming out of that trench, whether it's through hard work, through blessings, through prayer, through friends, family, all of the things. Like it just helps you not take any of that for granted, and it just opens up that gratitude. And then when other things, like even like the harder the better almost, is what I'm grateful for. And I'm hoping some of those things are back behind me. My wife and I will often talk, like early in our marriage we would talk about, hey, and a lot of it came from seeing other people's hardships and being like, we are so blessed, and trying to recognize that and say there will be a storm that comes and hits our front door, a tsunami, and we just got to do what we can to prepare for it. And so grateful for that. Like hopefully the hardest ones have come, but maybe they haven't. But I do know that even if even harder ones come, then my gratitude can be even bigger on the other side of it.
Love that. Thanks for sharing that.
jeez, it's hard, a hard act to follow on things to be
Maybe
grateful.
I've had some big spoons, Blake.
I guess I have three that come to mind, right? So first, as we alluded to, like I'm incredibly grateful for the people that we're able to build the company with, right? But for both Mark and Rem, for their wives, they're incredible, and then for our employees that we somehow have lucked into, they are amazing and awesome, and just so grateful for them, right? And in the same vein, I'm so grateful for the partners that utilize our stuff that allow us to do this, that put themselves out there in a world that is very risky for them to to have negative feedback about them at all. I'm very very grateful for that. And then the other two things I think are closely related. Like I am incredibly grateful for the blessing of being able to have faith. And I don't know how you run a business honestly without faith. Of being able to get a phone call and you'd be like, "Crap, we just lost." Whatever it is, or this bad thing just happened. And, over the years, I've just gotten more and more faith of it's okay, it's going to work out, right? Like whatever it is, as sucky as it is, it's going to work out.
Mm.
And I'm very grateful for those experiences that just stacked on top of each other, make it easier and easier to say it's okay, it's going to work out, regardless of what it is. And then I think coupled with that is I'm incredibly grateful for a savior that promises an abundant life, and that means a whole bunch of things. It may not be an abundance of money, but man is an abundance of blessings when you look around and actually see them and find them. And I firmly believe that he does come to bring us life and comes to bring it more abundantly. And it's an abundance of friends, it's an abundance of opportunities, it is an abundance of hardships. But strangely, that also brings an abundance of joy.
Yeah.
And so I'm grateful for all of those things.
Well, I appreciate the both of you. And I think, one thing that's been on my mind and kind of tying both of your fundamental like things you're grateful for, I feel like we go through trials so that we can learn to empathize with other people. And because it's like, I've never started a business the way you guys have. I like, if I ever start one and it starts to scale, like you guys can empathize with me and help me because you've felt that. And I think we all are going through trials, and I think the savior and God's like interesting way of helping his children is like giving other people trials so that people can empathize with each other and like help each other. And anyways, dude, I don't know why I just said that, but it's been on my mind.
Oh man,
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just a thought.
I understand, agree. I had, speaking of partnership being awesome and helpful, I had back surgery about a year ago, right? Which didn't know I was going to have kind of emergency back surgery. And so I was out just like on my back for 6 weeks, right? And everybody handled everything here. Rem and Mark did awesome. And it was great not to have to worry about that at all. But the same surgery I had, a friend of mine had, and it didn't work very well, right? And so Eddie's going back in tomorrow, Monday, to have that same another surgery on it. And man, my heart just breaks for him in a way that, I would have felt bad for him before, but it's just a different thing. Right. And so I do think so much of this is helping us feel what others feel so we can then be more motivated to help them in other ways.
100%. I think we can end there. I think this has been a wonderful conversation. I appreciate you guys being on. Thank you so much for being good friends to me. I'm grateful for the both of you. Like, I'm not from the Valley, and this Valley's really given me a lot of it's saved my life. And I appreciate both of you just spending an hour with me. And I'm cheering you guys on. And if I can help in any way with your business or anything, let me know. But thanks for being on today, fellas. Hope you have a great weekend.
Likewise,
Of course,
and
man.
think in an awesome spot to talk about all that stuff because it's sometimes can be a taboo, but also just such a awesome thing to get out there into the world. So thanks for doing it.
Yeah, for sure. Have a great day, guys.
See you, Brian.
Yep.